and M&S today. We can go to the next slide. So today we're excited to we're actually going to summarize our rate work group feedback on the exceptions process. This group, as well as our advisory committee, gave us some really good recommendations. So we're going to go over that. We're also going to begin to review the upcoming cost report and share some of the beginning steps of that cost report for feedback today. And we'll use the meeting today and our meeting in July to review the cost report. I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping things, is that this rate group is open to the public, but members of the public can ask questions through the chat feature here on Teams, but you won't be able to, ask questions through, your audio questions. The reason why we do this is we want to make sure we engage a diverse group of stakeholders in dialogue, but also, run the meetings. We have rate work group members that are active participants and provide transparency to the general public. So if you also want to submit a question to the Bureau of Developmental Services in regards to the rate setting work group activities, there's an email here, bds@dhhs.nh.gov, and we will provide a response if you submit your questions to us through that avenue. We also have closed captioning available for those individuals that would like to use that service today. Did I get everything, Krista, on that? Okay. We can go to the next slide. So one of the things today is the exceptions request review. Over the past 3 months, we've been talking about the exceptions process. We've had really great, productive discussions that's been guided by earlier feedback and considerations from our assessment focus group. And the exceptions process has been broken down into 5 components: the exception types, the process, the documentation requirements, the exceptions review timeline, and the review team composition and what that may look like. As part of this journey in reviewing each of these topic areas, we've also been able to share some examples of what other states have done for food for thought for us to look at and consider as we develop our exceptions process. We also, after our meeting last May, we sent out to our rate work group members a short survey to request any additional feedback from them about the different components in the exceptions process. We received 2 responses and just 1 additional recommendation from that survey. And the additional recommendation you will see over here is on the exceptions review timeline process, which the respondent was saying some reviews may go smoothly with less time. Some could be more complex, requiring more time. Some states allow 90 days to review. At this time, the proposal that we were getting from the feedback is a 30-day process. And so this respondent is saying that the 30 days appear adequate, but we might want to do some time studies before making a final decision on our timeline. So that was good feedback for us. You will see in the appendix of this presentation the feedback that was mostly captured live during our groups too. So that's included on this. So what is going to be happening now is over the next few months, the Bureau of Developmental Services will be taking this feedback and will begin to draft the exceptions process and bring it back to this team for their review. So just wanted to summarize where we are with that. Jess, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that or if I captured it.
Nope, that sounded fine.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Krista, to begin sharing information about the cost report that's in development at this time. Unless there are any questions from the rate work group members on the exceptions process so far.
I think we're good. I think we'll find other issues once we get in and start doing the exceptions. How
Yeah.
things always happen.
Thank you, Erin. Okay, Krista, you're on deck.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're going to take a little trip down memory lane to about 2 years ago when we were all in the middle of discussing and developing the cost report that was initially set for collecting information related to the developmental disabilities waiver, the in-home supports waiver, in-home supports for children waiver, and the acquired brain disorder waiver services. And those were for select services only. So if you remember, we started talking about that cost report back in March of 22, and we worked diligently through July of 2022 to develop this cost report with your input, which was greatly appreciated. That process also included time for us to test the cost report, receive feedback on the test, and implement those changes before the cost report was released to the larger group. And if you remember, we would go through and we talked in detail about the services, the type of expenses that we were going to collect, what other information we're going to collect. And remember, that was all in an effort for us to develop rates for these services. And now that we've collected that information, we are looking to transition to developing a cost report that will be requested annually for the department's use. So this cost report is being developed in order to provide the department with information on cost and other data related to the services provided through developmental services, and that includes the administrative activities as well as service delivery to individuals that receive services through the waivers. I really would like to emphasize that we understand that services are always undergoing change, and there is still a lot in motion related to services such as the administrative services that the area agencies are providing. Also, service coordination that's still under development. And so really what we are looking for on the cost report is historical. And yes, we agree that it may not represent 100% of what's going to happen in the future. But I know for me, my crystal ball doesn't work very well, and it's always good to have a baseline of costs and other data for use for analysis going forward. So just remember that this cost report is used to collect the historical information, what has happened, what did happen, versus trying to project what costs will be for the future. Hi, Matt.
Hi, sorry, I had technical issues. I'm jumping in already. So, do you mind just making sure that for every nonprofit, in order for us to get loans to, use for our operating accounts and all that stuff, we have to make sure we have a minimum of 2 to 3% in like cash flow. You would refer to it as profitability, but it's really just making sure that we meet the metrics for our banks. No, you can be well above that, but if you're below that, we're not going to be able to get any like lines of credit. So if we don't have a little bit of profitability, if that makes sense, because we won't have the cash flow to repay loans and all that. And that's what happened in Vermont, and that's why they had an exodus of providers a few years ago. They cut everything down to the bone.
So I guess my question for you, would you be using the cost report to apply for those bank loans, or would you be using your own financial information for those loans?
No, I just want to make sure as we're considering new rates that we don't put the rates or set the rates at such a level that in the process of trying to save money across the state, that we inadvertently shoot ourselves in the foot by making a rate that's unsustainable, or might be quote unquote correct because we're making sure we cut out of the system. But I just want to make sure that doesn't happen to that point. That's all.
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. And I think we could probably look into that when we start sharing information related to rates later this summer or early in the fall. We can definitely take a look at that there and see where the rates are headed and what it looks like for each, or then you'll have information to see what it looks like for each agency. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. All right. So right now, our anticipated timeline for having the first year annual cost report submissions, as Lori mentioned earlier, we are collecting your feedback on the cost report development through this rate work group meeting, through next rate work group meeting in July. And then in August, we're also meeting during the BDS provider meeting to share the cost report before it's released to see if there are any aha moments where we can implement within the cost report, with the cost report before it's released to everybody. We are planning a release of the cost report sometime in September of this year and allow 120 days for completion. So that would put the due date somewhere in January of 2025. Again, this is all anticipated and what's in flex. I know that you weren't able to look at the draft cost report that we've developed so far prior to this meeting, but really we have taken the cost report that was developed 2 years ago, and we're making modifications in order to transition it from collecting all the necessary information related to calculating rates versus being able to report information on an annual basis and have that historical cost information. So a lot of the information will look familiar. It might be reformatted from feedback that we received from providers when they submitted the cost reports, changes that we've made. Also, we've shared previously in the meetings the rate structure that we're proposing to use. So the expenses section, when Leslie gets into it, is laid out a little bit differently to match those components a little bit closer for like medication management or transportation, so we can really isolate those costs. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leslie, and she's going to kind of walk us through our very initial rough draft that we would like to have a great conversation with you today on, and then we'll also show comparisons between the original cost report and what we're proposing for the upcoming one.
Thanks, Krista. All right, I'm going to show just kind of as a baseline the cost report that we did a few years ago. So you should right now be seeing the original provider data tab. So as Krista mentioned, the cost report that we're going to kind of just briefly look at today, the new annual cost report, it's extremely rough. We are still we're kind of just in the beginning phases of this modification, making the proposed changes. But some of these changes we wanted to get in front of you so that you could kind of see the direction we're heading, get that feedback from you early before we get too far. So I wanted to kind of remind you guys that the 3 staffing tabs that we had: administrative staff, program staffing, direct staffing, where we had the drop downs. We had to select the different position titles. When we got to direct staffing, we were looking for, are they an employee or a contractor? What's the education required for the position? What's that experience required? And then we had you calculate allocation percentages to allocate those wages and hours to all of the different services. And a lot of that information, especially when you look at direct staff for the education and the experience, we needed that information at that level in order to develop the rate methodology. We wanted to see what was that education, what was that experience, so that we could then look at occupation codes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and kind of get into all of that minutia. As we move to the annual cost report, we don't necessarily need that level of detail. So we're proposing some changes as we are looking at these, I guess, wages and hours paid hours when we go to look at that new one. The expenses tab, and I apologize, I'm going to go back and select services so we can see different columns. When we come over to the expenses, one of the other pieces, as you just saw again, so I was selecting different services. So we have columns now that have shown up. We have different worksheets that have shown up. That annual cost report is not going to have macros enabled in it. So all of the columns will be there. All of the worksheets are going to be there. There isn't going to be that ability to kind of like change the cost report to suit your specific services. And that's due to the cost reports are going to be submitted into BDS, into the state. And so there's some compatibility there. So all of the macros will have been removed. As far as the expenses, we had a lot of the expenses we're allocating, like we had allocations already built in to the worksheet. I'll show you when we get to the new one how that is different. And then as Krista mentioned, as we get down into the different sections, we've just moved some things and kind of tried to streamline things based on not only feedback that we received, but also as we were doing the analysis from the cost reports, things that we saw as the data was coming in that we were like, oh, had we asked that differently? So we made some changes there as well. When we get into the green sections down here, the benefits, PTO, training turnover, transportation med management, those worksheets are still going to be there. We're just making some modifications and some additions there. When we get into the service specific worksheets, the plan right now is we will not have those service specific worksheets. A lot of that data we don't necessarily continue to need. We needed it to develop that initial rate methodology. Some of it we still do want to gather, but the plan is that we will move those over into kind of that green section of worksheets. And maybe we'll have a staffing ratios worksheet, and then we'll have the different services that those ratios would apply to within that worksheet. So just kind of wanted to walk through some of those possible changes going forward. Is any questions before I switch over to the new worksheets that we wanted to walk through today? Matt?
Sorry. With all the transitions that have taken place during this year, the beginning of the year, we had a lot of expenses that we don't have now. So are we going to look at the entire year? Or are we going to try to focus in on what the contemporary expenses are?
Yes, the plan for an annual cost report would be that we would look at the 12 months of your last fiscal year that aligns with your trial balance and your financial statements. And it'll be that way going forward. It would always be that your fiscal year that would tie to your financials.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Knowing that, yeah, there's always going to be things that kind of ebb and flow and things that come up. So it's really just starting like, you have this now in rule. Let's get this base so that we can start going forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, stop sharing this. And okay. So as I mentioned earlier, this is still draft form. And we really wanted to focus on the worksheets that kind of have the most changes, the ones that we've kind of dug into. So first off, the plan is that we will not have those 3 staffing worksheets at that position level. with the allocation percentages. So we won't have the admin staffing, program staffing, direct staffing tabs. What we will have is the expenses tab that you are used to seeing. And we have the direct hands-on caregiver salaries and wages section here. And there now are, I guess, categories of staff. So we have direct care staff. We have case manager, service coordinator. We have RN, direct care only, LPN, direct care only, clinical staff, direct care only. And the plan is that over in the informational icons, we will have, whether it's position titles or examples, but we're going to try and be as, robust as we can to help you guys kind of know, okay, so where do I put this individual that does that direct hands-on care? And then when we get down into the program related salaries, you can see that we've got, program or residential manager or director, program residential supervisor, program residential coordinators. Now, once again, we're gonna, want feedback on what lines should be there. Do you need supervisors and coordinators? Do kind of what lines do we need? We'll update those informational icons, kind of all of that. And then when we get down into the administrative staff, the categories become your executive staff, your office operations, your business staff, and we've got compliance, quality assurance, and then there might need to be some additional categories that you guys feel like, oh yeah, no, we use that a lot. Each of those sections is going to have an other line. The other difference from previous is that on the expenses section, when you get to this other, I think in the last one, we had the opportunity to enter in an expense description, which was sometimes used and sometimes not. Sometimes that still ended up blank. So what we're going to do here is there's going to be a hyperlink. It's going to go now to this other worksheet where, when I clicked on one that was down below, so it went up here, but each of those other lines is going to have its own section where you're going to put in the detail of, okay, what makes up that other. You're going to put in your expenses by service that adds up to the total, and then it's going to populate over in that expenses. So hopefully it's kind of a more clear-cut way to get in that other, and we'll get some more detail if that other is necessary. And then there'll be a hyperlink back and to the expenses tab. The other piece I mentioned when we were looking at the other, that we had some default allocations in that previous cost survey. We've removed those. So what we would anticipate is that you all would look at your financials, look at your expense information, and you are actually going to need to enter in those expenses for each individual service. And then as you enter in those, it will sum up to this column D. Ultimately, this column D is what needs to tie to your trial balance and or financial statements. But those default allocations have been removed. We're hoping that that gives a better understanding of the service expenses. Having those default allocations in there resulted kind of in some skewing of expenses when it came to specific services. So we know that this first year, especially, it's going to be your actual cost from the previous year. But when it comes to maybe breaking it out by service, you might still maybe have to be guesstimating some of that, even though your total is going to be the same. But knowing that this is going to be the annual cost report going forward, we hope that providers will start getting their information and having their information so that they can, better complete the cost report as we move forward. So that's the other hope is, if we can get this out to you guys so these guys can see, here's the expectation, here's what's going to be wanted each year, then you can start, getting kind of things together and start tracking information in a certain way if you're not already. So the payroll taxes and employee benefits, kind of same as we had previously, kind of talked through the different wage sections. We do have a separate medication management salary and wages section so that we can specifically target that. We have the administrative with the non-reimbursable, so it's all in one section now. We do have bonus payments, so they're now separated out from the wages and salaries. You have your non-payroll contract personnel separate. Stipends, so we have that separate stipend section. We have a non-payroll pass-through section. And then we have transportation. So transportation, once again, is its own separate section because in some cases we have a separate transportation component now of the rate. So we want to make sure that we are isolating those expenses. As far as the program related expenses, we are still kind of in the process of streamlining those. When we received the cost reports back and we were kind of going through the analysis, sometimes it was difficult because we had some expenses that were both in program related and in administrative in general. And it was hard to tell like why those got split or how did they get split. So we're still working with BDS and we'll, get feedback from you all as well of, kind of making sure that we can streamline this and, where best can we put that so that going forward, it's easier to analyze or easier to understand, easier for all of you to fill out because it's a lot. We have the room and board section. And then your administrative in general and your non-reimbursable. So a lot of the sections still the same. Some of them we've carved out. Those expenses were still on the original cost report. It's just that we're kind of trying to look at them a little bit differently or pull them out. The plan is we'd still have all these informational icons that will, have some clarification as to what's being expected in that line.
Leslie, we have a couple questions in here in the chat from Suzanne. So I'll start just going through them. The first part of her question is, what impact does the cost report have on the work associated with the rate setting?
It does not actually have any impact on the rate setting as it sits right now. We've used the cost surveys that we received from a few years ago. Working with BDS, we've updated the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we're using more recent Bureau of Labor Statistics information and updated inflation calculation in those rates. But this cost report is really that annual cost report that's now part of the rule going forward.
Then the next question is, how are you allocating coordinators / supervisors, managers, directors, etc., staff who do direct care as well?
So that will be, I guess, part of our discussion as to, like how do we want to do that? So when we did the cost survey back in 2022, we kind of told you guys, hey, if it's part of their standard job description, then go ahead and split. And what they do for direct care, put it up in direct. If they don't, keep it in program related. I would say probably that'll be the guidance going forward. That if it's part of their regular job description, then please separate it out. But if it's not part of their general job description and they just happened to do it because it was needed, I would still keep it down in the program related salaries and wages. But we will make sure, as far as in the instructions and in the informational icons, that we're as clear as we can be as to what the expectation is.
And Suzanne, I believe that that would also go with your next statement after that question, with also some of the titles that are administrative that perform program related work as well.
Yeah. And mainly that's just, as we have as this cost report, gets going, if down the road, the next time that a waiver is due, or the next time the state does do a rebase, then it will have this cost report information that it could use. And so we just want to make sure that however we do build this going forward, that the information is as useful as it can be for whatever purpose the state, has. So they don't have to go and create a whole separate thing or have a separate survey. They can use the information that you're already giving them. That's the hope anyway.
She has a few more questions, but Matt, I believe, do you have a comment related to what we were just speaking to?
No, finish the questions. I
Okay.
got it stuck in my head, so thank you.
Okay. Also, Suzanne was wondering how do changes in things such as insurance cost increase, the 724 FSLA exempt salary threshold change, other inflation impact, how do those impact how rates are being set?
It's with the current rate methodology that we're looking at. I think as I said, we updated the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We've updated the benefits percentage, or we've looked at that and kind of, looked at what's happening trend wise there. And then it's just kind of looking to see kind of where the rates are at, but I don't think there's any additional information that we're looking at this time as far as that rate methodology.
And then her last question is, part of that question is, are you breaking out the transportation expenses to the new non-medical transportation service versus some of the other services such as CPS?
So, Leslie, I might jump in here. So
Yep.
the answer to that is no. But within the, and Leslie, you correct me if I get this wrong. So some services have transportation included within the rate. We are just looking at to capture your transportation services for that service, because it's a brick within the rate, if you will, that we're, always going to be like looking at. So no changes to how transportation is delivered through services that it's included within. Hopefully that answered your question, Sue.
All right. So Matt, I believe you're up.
Thank you. Sorry with all the millions of questions, but how we work as a billing service, a trading partner for other companies. Some of those other companies are now going to be, because it's been a year and they're able to get their systems into place, onboarding that service back to themselves. Now, we were providing that service at below the actual cost of that they're going to recognize. How is that going to be captured on this report? Because they were sending that out. Now they're bringing new employees in to do that.
So
And will it even be captured? Or is that like a footnote they should put on there? Like, we were paying for the service, now we're bringing it in-house. This is what we anticipated us using.
So like for your cost report, you'll have your actual expenses and your actual staff, and we'll get to the hours worksheet here in a second. But that expense would go into that other programs column that we had and will continue to have. And I'll pull over here because it's all the way over to the section now. So there'll still be that other programs section because you need to tie to your financials. And so that's where you would put that in this initial year. For those other providers, they then, if they've have staff now that, they would put in that whatever service they're actually providing, they would then have their expenses and their hours for those staff in that service. Because this is the first annual cost report, there's not really necessarily a need for them to give us any explanations, because we really won't have, if they did submit a cost report for the initial survey, then we would have it, but a lot of providers didn't, the non-area agency providers. So it's just a matter of them giving us what their actual expenses were for the year that tie to their financials.
So Leslie, this is Lori. I wanted to clarify that. So if last year I, as a provider, which I'm doing this cost report for, used a trading partner, those are the expenses I would capture, not my current year. I just want to be really clear about that. So if I used One Sky to do my CPS billing, for example, let's get really specific with that, and I paid them a monthly fee, I would record that as an expense under my CPS, correct?
Correct.
So so again, Matt, again, at the beginning of this, which is, they've been drilling into my head, this is a report to show what your expenses were, not what they will be.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that that gets emphasized, because the issue we have is like, so when we were starting all of this, we deliberately offered a ridiculously low rate for trading partnering, so that we could help some of our smaller providers make it through this transition. And I know of at least two of them, because now, like, I know what our actual expenses are and we can't continue to be generous, are going to go and try to do it themselves, which means that what we were charging them, which was like a couple $1,000s for the year, and they're going to now have to onboard a $40,000 employee with taxes, benefits, and all that stuff to do what we were doing. And so what I want to make sure is that people understand that that's not being considered or accounted for. And so when you're building out these rates and stuff like that, that might be accounted for next year and the year after, and all that, but don't be thinking like, I'm going to plug this in and it's going to help me, because it's not. It's literally, we're only looking at what transpired over the last year. And that went back to my whole question of, are we doing a contemporary review of the last quarter? Are we only looking at, or are we emphasizing the last quarter? Or are we looking at the entire year?
Yeah.
And that was why, when you answered that. So I just want to I want it to be painfully clear. Let's put it that way. And I think I've beaten the horse to death.
No, and then that's why, I mean, we had planned on bringing it up quite a bit too, is that the survey that we did for the rate methodology is completely separate from this annual cost report. So the annual cost report, is beginning and is going to start. So you guys are giving annual information, but it is that annual, what happened during your last during your last fiscal year. That is that actual historical information. Yeah, and whatever happened, that's what happened. And so we just want you to report what happened, and then next year you'll report what happened in that year.
Just confirming, Leslie, this is fiscal year 2023, right? That's what you are looking for.
That's the plan, yes. That it'll be for your fiscal year ending 2023. Unless you are a 12/31 provider. If their fiscal year is a 12/31, then we would expect them to do a January 1 to 12/31 of 2020. No, it'd still be 2023. Okay, I'm going to take that back. Sorry. So if you're a 12/31, we're expecting you to do 2023. If you are a June 30, 2024, we're planning to have this cost report out in September. We actually want you to submit it for June 30 of 2024.
Okay, so then you will be looking for FY24, not 23 then.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I had to work my way through that. Yes. No, we would like you to do the June 30, 2024.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a quick question. My question is that you are specifically looking for these programs, not like other programs that we as an entity provide. Because our bottom line budget is going to look like on our 1099 is going to look a lot different than what we really, use for these programs, because we have grants, funding, we have other programs that aren't waivered programs. So that would be my assumption. So like if you pulled our 1099, our bottom line is going to look different than our bottom line is for these specific, for service coordination, which we provide.
So we do have that other programs column in here. So all of those other services, so we're still in discussions with BDS as to what these columns are going to look like. So in that original cost survey, we were only looking for specific services and also those administrative, for the area agencies, we also had some administrative expenses, but there were only specific services that we were looking to do a rate methodology for. So everything else was landing in those other programs. We're talking with BDS of, are there other columns, because this is now an annual cost report. It's no longer tied to the rate methodology. Do you want to include some of those other columns, get them out of other programs so that you can actually see what the expenses or revenues or whatever are for those services going forward? And whether that's, we've kind of talked about community integration. We've talked about assistive technology. And I don't know if those are great examples. We've also talked about contracted services. You guys, have those separate contracted services with the state. And so that's still kind of, if you guys have feedback on that, let us know. But everything else would end up in that other programs. As far as the expenses and the hours, we also are planning, you can see that there's now a revenue worksheet. We didn't have that in the original cost survey because as far as a rate methodology, it wasn't necessarily, all that useful to develop a rate methodology. But now that we're doing an annual cost report, we will want revenue. And right now the revenue worksheet, extremely, extremely rough. And it's just kind of getting started. But right now, what it kind of looks like is, having a service revenue section, having all of the different services that would align with the columns that we're seeing on the expense, having a pass-through revenue section, kind of, how does that all need to look? But it would be your entire book of business, not just these specific waiver services. So you would see your bottom line kind of as you were talking about it for the whole book of business.
Okay, because we do a lot of different book of business because we're,
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that might be something that we might really need to have a discussion with you guys to how that would look. I mean, we've got federal contracts, we've got, grants, we've got state contracts, we've got donations, we've got
Yes.
a lot of different revenue sources coming in.
Yeah. And so, when we have this other non-operating revenue and we do have grants, we've got sales, it is a matter of, are there lines that we could include in there that are, general enough that you're not having to break out? You're going to have to break out stuff anyway, because you have all those different categories, but can we help you out so that it's not at this huge detail level, especially when it's the non-waiver, like there's some detail we want, and then there's other where you just need to lump it and not have to have also, use or, have to add more other, because the revenue section will also have the other, just like I showed you guys on the expenses. But we just we're still really fleshing this out.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
I already gave a warning to Jane, our business manager, that, it's coming, we're gonna have fun again. So, because it is a bit of a challenge because of what we do. So, yeah, okay, we'll figure it out.
But
So
that's,
Aaron, I think you do bring a good point up, Aaron, because I mean, a lot of providers have different books of business. So whether they have one or a million, like you may do. So I think the goal, Leslie, just one more time, is that we just need it to, tie out their financials, right? So we just need to have an opportunity to have you put the other revenues in another bucket and your other expenses in another bucket. We're focusing on the cost report for the services that you're providing for us, but to tie it out, you have to have the ability to show, because if you're, and I'm learning this too, so hopefully I'm getting this right, but if you show you brought in $100,000, but your revenue for these services were 50, then you have to show what did you do? What was your revenue for the other 50 in expenses? Is that right,
Yes.
Leslie? Okay.
Well, and that makes
Yeah.
sense to me too,
Yeah.
because, right,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's some of that fundraising and other things that help support,
Yeah.
our ability to be able to do service
Yeah.
coordination. So, but then there are some that are restricted. It's a money in, it's a money out because we have specific contracts. So, okay.
Okay. Good feedback though, because
definitely.
our goal is to create a cost report that is I don't know if cost report and user friendly go in the same sentence, but that's our goal, Aaron. So thank you.
Yeah, we do. We try and make it as user friendly as possible, knowing that it's so
Yeah.
much information.
Yeah.
So we just received another question in the chat from Will. Will is wondering, what is the reporting going to look like for a family member, supervisors of FMEs, i.e. PDMS? Is it going to become more complex and fine-grained? So I guess my question for you, Lori,
Yeah.
is
would
would we mostly be, morning, Will?
Good morning.
So yeah. So right now the provider on record, and I'm shooting from the hip at this answer, Will, so bear with me for a moment, is the area agency. They bill for PDMS services. So they would be recording the revenue and the expenses. So if it was FME or whatever, they would be doing that portion of the cost report.
So you're saying that the family members would be working, interfacing with the area agencies themselves, and then everything we see here would be interfacing with BDS?
So the area agencies already, and again, bear with me, are receiving invoices and receipts from the self-directing manager of how those funds are being utilized. So they would have that data. And so they would be entering that into the cost report on behalf of all the PDMS families that they bill and provide that service for.
Okay.
Does that
I'm-
make sense, Will,
It
or
does
not
make sense.
really?
It does make sense. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
My main concern here is just really not adding a whole bunch of extra complexity on the families.
No, so
And
already, and Matt or anyone jump in, but already on a monthly basis, if you're directing your services, you're approving timesheets, approving invoices, approving things like that. It's showing where the expenses are going. Is it a CPS service? Is it CIS, community integration? What is that? So the area agencies are capturing that data, as they're billing Medicaid and paying out those services.
thank you.
Yeah,
But
well, as
yeah,
we
thank you, Shelley.
update records monthly, so we would have that data as your FMS entity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you. Also, Kim was asking, will we be providing the draft cost report after this meeting so we could share with so they could share with their business departments?
So the answer to that is not yet. Because this is still so far under construction. There's questions and stuff that we want to talk with BDS. We wanted to get your guys' feedback and kind of, where this was headed before we send out a rough draft. You will have a draft hopefully long before September, but not quite yet.
Will we have an opportunity to have a draft to give you feedback? Like, I'm not the person to be able to give feedback on this.
Yeah,
So
that is,
like, will we have an
the
opportunity
Yeah.
before July?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, yeah, I mean, I don't know about before July. So we do plan on talking about the cost report. I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Lori, but the plan right now is to still talk about the cost report at the July rate work group meeting.
Yeah, so these are all good things. So first
Yep.
of all, what you could do is at the next July rate work group meeting, at the next meeting in July, we'll be talking more about the cost report. So if you have staff that are experts in this, you're going to want them to attend as an attendee. Okay, so that's one. We are going to be also scheduling something at the provider meetings that we have bi-weekly to review the draft. That to me is really important, and it came as a recommendation to us. And we want to do that because one, it's not like taped on YouTube, so people can feel more comfortable asking questions or whatever. So we will have that. And I also do plan on meeting with the business managers of the area agencies, as there are parts of the cost report that only the area agencies will be doing for the med administrative rate. So I have that scheduled as well. So that's what our goal is, Kim.
Do you mind if I chime in just for
Sure.
a second? So when we as area agencies were going through the development of the first cost reports, for us to go through it first, there was a bunch of stuff that we were anxious about, and we met with them, and then we were given the cost reports. And as we went through the cost reports, there was just things that didn't work. It didn't make sense. So we were able to meet with Krista and a bunch of other people and bring that stuff to their attention. They went back and they fixed it, or I shouldn't say fixed it, but asked the questions in a different way so that it did fit and make sense.
Right, Matt. Yeah.
And when we first, I can speak from my region and only my region, not for Sisney or anyone else, just my region. I hope that's clear. When we had issues filling it out ourselves, we then had, was it 2 or 3 additional meetings with you, Krista, and your team?
Yeah.
And like when we first filled it out, it was wrong to say the least. And then our second swipe at it, we were still not hitting the target. But once we were able to go back a third time and meet with them and say, okay, we have this expense. I think one of them was actually like where my salary went and how that was tracked and all that stuff. We were able to dial it really like closely in. And going through the process, I will tell you that I kind of felt like I was on a roller coaster at first because it's the anxiety. And then once we hit the flow, it really wasn't at all like what I thought it was going to be. But doing it the first time, I will say, was terrible. It really was. But the support behind it, the second 2 times, made it much, much easier and much better. So I don't know if that gives anyone any like quells anyone's feelings or not, but the process was not as bad as it sounds. So.
Right, Matt. No, I think that's really helpful. I think it's like fear of the unknown if you've never done something before and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm capturing it. One of the other things that we said at the beginning today is we're into full transparency, working in partnership. I mean, we want to get good data from the cost report. So the better we help people fill it out, the better data we get. One of the things is that, we have that 120-day time frame for completion. So maybe what we can take into consideration is when it is issued to, is a check-in meeting with folks doing it with the ability to answer questions and things like that. So we're definitely want to be as supportive as we can. I do want to clarify one thing in case I didn't clarify it earlier. Families will not be completing a cost report. I just want to put that out there in case there was any confusion on that. It's if you're an enrolled provider and billing Medicaid for waiver services, that's when you're subject to the completion of the cost report. If I got that right. Jess, did you
Not
want to?
PDMS families get done through the area agency, not themselves.
Correct. It's the area
Right.
agency is the enrolled provider. So you would be filling them out based on your, being that enrolled provider. That's really the key. So if
Yeah,
I'm
and
a family and I enroll as a provider and, I'm providing services for myself and for others, then I would be doing a cost report.
right.
ahead,
And I
Jess.
think that,
Yeah.
as we kind of get into some of the, and this ties in nicely to what Matt was
Yeah.
just talking about, the
Yeah.
TA and the support as we're starting to
Yes.
jump into the cost reporting. Is there an instance when a family would be, providing maybe more detailed information to the area agency or the FMS entity to support that cost reporting? There are some PDMS structures that we utilize in New Hampshire that might call for that. Not a ton of those programs across the state, very few in fact, but
All right.
still some instances where that would happen. Abby Conger, if folks don't know on this call, is definitely our PDMS, guru in New Hampshire. So maybe what we can do is in one of our future meetings, have like a PDMS focused conversation to talk about what that looks like. Cause I know we have a lot of family members joining, maybe not on the committee, but in the, attending and watching too, that might have some general questions on, hey, am I going to have to do something or not? And what's that collaboration going to look like? And I think to Matt's point too, definitely heard that, Matt. And, we can take a look too at different TA type structures and how to support folks as they're going through either one-to-one or maybe drop-in type format too. So no one's feeling alone on an island, so to speak, with the spreadsheet trying to work through it.
Yeah, and I
Abby,
will
did
say
you want to? Oh, go ahead, Matt.
no, we're willing to help screw up your cost report if you want us to. So if there's anyone that wants to come and be misinformed, we're happy to help you.
Oh, great, great. So again, thank you for the feedback. We are trying to set up some meetings to, to share information, to receive questions, and to help make the cost report as, informative and easy to follow.
Hey, I just had a quick comment because something that you
Yes,
said
Erin.
that anybody who is billing Medicaid will be expected to do the cost report and the support. And I'm just thinking about like our behavioral folks who bill Medicaid. And I think it's going to be real important that those guys get support. It's tough enough getting a budget from them, let alone you guys trying to get a cost report from them. So I just, I wasn't even thinking, I was just thinking of the larger entities and people providing like residential and everything. But when you say anybody who bills Medicaid, that now goes down to our, small behaviors of one person or maybe a small group.
Right. So good point. And I want to take that back to say anyone that this cost report is only for our waiver services or admin rate. So I'm only speaking to that particular type of Medicaid billing. And again, depending on the service that they're billing for, the cost report might be much easier to complete too. Matt.
So we have a bunch of those providers as trading partners, and we, just so they're aware, we will be providing actual technical assistance. They are probably going to have to follow up with the state or with Krista and her team. But the first go around, you won't be doing it alone with us.
Okay. So we do at the provider meeting in July, I'm working with Abby to get a time scheduled, and we'll get that date out ahead. So our goal is to, spread the net as wide as we can and offer, as Jess said, as much technical assistance as well. So thank you.
So Kim, I guess to circle back to your question, at some point we definitely will have a draft, but there will be more than a few opportunities for people to see the cost report, and we'll continue to walk through as we continue to develop the draft and get more of a final draft. There'll be multiple opportunities to see it, and then we'll get a draft out, and probably just to a subset or to this group. And hopefully we'll have a good final rough draft by the July meeting.
Thanks. I'm less worried about technical assistance. I have a good business department. I didn't know if you really were looking for feedback or not.
Yeah, I mean, and this really was just to show you guys the major changes, like getting rid of those staffing worksheets is big, kind of, where we're headed, and make sure if you guys were seeing any glaring issues, anything like that. And we still do need to talk about the hours. We still have a couple worksheets to look through, but that was really where I guess Krista and I were for today is, hey, here's the major changes we're looking at. What do you guys think? All right, I'm going to move on to the hours. So yes, we got rid of the staffing tabs. We still do want to understand the hours of your staff and what they've worked, and the hours that correspond to the wages that you've now entered on the expenses tab. So this hours tab is only the staffing sections. So the direct hands-on caregiver hours, program related, medication management, administrative, we still, the non-reimbursable. We do have the contract personnel hours if you do track that and if you have it. And then we also have stipend hours, once again, if you track it, if you have it. So whatever categories we land on for the expenses section will be the same categories for the hours. So whatever lines we have, there'll be a corresponding line on the hours tab. And we will want you to hopefully be able to give us those hours by service. There will be that other programs column for those of you who do have the administrative categories or the services. Those will be in here, and we would want you to figure out for those wages for last year what actually happened. What are those hours that were specific to that admin? And that would be total hours that are related to the wages that you had on the expenses tab. So if we were to take wages divided by hours to calculate an average hourly wage, it should make sense. And then it'll sum up those hours over on the left in column D. So we're not asking you to calculate allocation percentages or anything like that. We're actually looking for the number of hours. So you still had that information to calculate the allocation. We're not going to that step.
Shelley?
For other programs that businesses have, can we just have like an other program line and just dump all their hours? Because some of our programs do have direct hands-on caregiver, I would say, and I just don't want to have to break it all down because I don't think it's useful for this exercise.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk internally, but I think every section, I guess, other than medication management and contract personnel, but of these three up here, there will be that other So if you wanted to click on the other and just put one line over here and say other programs hours and put it all over into that column, that would be fine. And we'll kind of talk if there's another. 'Cause
Yeah,
we'll work,
let's kind of use an example of
we'll
that,
work with
Leslie.
that.
Say I run a
Let's say have home assist
muffin
to elder
business.
program.
Yeah, I'm going to do something even more. I just run a catering business that is my other book of business, right? So I have cooks and whatever. So, and I bring in $100,000 a year for that, and I have expenses. So how would I record that? I know the $100,000 in revenue would go under other revenue, but would you, I don't think we would want them to have to outline, how much went to the cooks, how much went to transportation of that service.
No.
We would want to know this was other revenue and this was expenses to bring in that revenue, right? We just
Yeah.
basically want to get that
That's what
so it lines up. Yeah.
a revenue line and expense line. For example, like we have a home assist, which does have direct caregivers. I don't want to have to
Yeah.
break time because you're not looking at that information here.
Right.
Correct.
We got it, Shelley. Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll
Thank
talk
you.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just because I'm trying from the expense worksheet standpoint, I just want to make sure because we need to make changes to both. And so, yeah, if we have a separate section and then we'll still have the column. Yeah, we'll work through that, Shelley. And same as I had on the other, and I guess I just walked through it too, that there will be this other line that'll have the hyperlink that then goes over to the other worksheet where you can put in descriptions of that other or one lump other.
Yeah.
And then still put the number of hours for whichever service or the other programs that it applies to. And then it'll populate over here. And even some of that functionality hasn't necessarily been built yet, but that's the plan. So you're still gonna have to aggregate your hours. You're still gonna have to kind of aggregate your positions into which category they go in. Hopefully we'll be able to be as clear as possible in the informational icons and in the instructions to kind of help you guys know where to categorize your staff. But we're not asking you to do it by position, by employee, or to calculate those percentages anymore. We'd like you to give us the actual number of hours and the actual expenses, depending on that particular line. And we are planning also kind of a separate summary worksheet that if like just certain applicable things that we think will be beneficial, kind of check figures, things like that, certain calculations. We're still working through what that's going to look like, but there is a plan to have kind of a summary worksheet as well for all of you. So if there might be anything that you're like, hey, I'd kind of like to have this as a check figure or this calculation, let us know. And hopefully, yeah, we'll have a draft of that for July.
So Leslie, just for the rookie in me, that will help me be like, oh, is my summary looking right? Because if something's off, then I know to go back and reconfigure a section because I did something wrong. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think that will be very beneficial. Like it's kind of like a self-assessment of yourself, right? Okay. Again, I just want to reiterate while we just have a little pause. If you have folks in your midst, in your organizations, invite them to review this video that will be posted invite them to attend our next rate work session in July. So we get the information out and get feedback from, as many as possible.
And like I mentioned earlier, we looked at the previous cost survey. We still are planning on having kind of that benefits and PTO section, just like what our providers offering for those. There will be a training hours section, so we're still going to ask you about training hours. There's probably actually going to be some additional things for that training that kind of came out of the data analysis. We'll ask about turnover, med management information. So some of that will still be on here. It might look a little different, but we'll still be asking about that. And then some of the stuff that was on the service specific worksheets, staffing ratios, will still probably be in here. It's just going to look different. And there's probably going to be some other things that were on the service specific worksheets that we're going to pull over and have a standard worksheet for. Because it is good information to have on an annual basis, and would be useful if the state does do a rebase down the road. So we want to be cognizant of that, that, we don't need all of the detail that we had when we were doing that initial rate methodology, but is there information we still want to have so that down the road, if there is a component that, like, yep, we want to update that, everybody, the information's already there. Any additional questions? Any, I guess, concerns about where we're headed or like the changes that we've made? Any like, yay, we don't have to do the staffing worksheets anymore? I know you still have to have, you're still getting the same data. You're just aggregating it differently, but.
Matt?
Yeah, I have just one thing. Just to remind everyone, as you're going through this, it's not completely set in stone. If there are issues, problems, and stuff like that, they will work with you. They did work with the area agencies. And then Ellen McCann's group, I can't think of, I think it's Helms and Co. I know CISNY contracts with them. They have done an excellent job in helping us. So I'm just throwing those two things out there. I don't think Ellen's here today. If you are, please chime in.
I
But,
don't think she is, Matt. I believe she's off this week.
Oh, good. She got a little plug from me. They were
Yeah.
very helpful. I will say, like, I was very apprehensive, and I think Lori and the rest of the team can say that I beat the hell out of them in every meeting about it. And then it was not as bad at all as I thought it was going to be. And I wouldn't say it was enjoyable, but it was the least painful thing that it needed to be. It was as painful as it needed to be, but not any more than that.
That is high praise from you, Matt. So thank you.
I don't give a lot of compliments. I think we all know this. So, but I want to make sure if there's anyone out there that was feeling like I was feeling a year ago, like it's just not as bad as you think it's going to be. And it will definitely sharpen how you're doing your accounting. I will say that.
Yeah, and that, oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I don't know if Shelley's team mad or not. Go ahead, Leslie.
And hopefully, with all the changes that we are making, hopefully it still looks similar, that you guys are like, oh yeah, no, the lines, the different categories, yeah, we might have shifted some things around, but it's all still there. And the general format still the same. Still kind of, we want you to tie to your trial balance of your financial statement for the year. We want you to look at, what actually happened during the year. None of that's really changed. So, and it is like, as I said, this is a rough draft that we're just getting going on. So we do want that input and that feedback of, add this line, add this category, here's why. And then we can discuss with BDS and we can get those changes made. Yeah, definitely. That's one of the reasons we wanted to get this in front of you guys, knowing that like we're not as far as we would like to be. It really is rough, but if we could get it out to you guys, at least to get that general impression and get that general feedback, we know we're on the right track. And now I'm comfortable really digging in and getting moving.
Yeah,
I didn't want to get too far and then have to redo everything.
And Leslie and Krista, I just wanted to let you know that your one-to-one meeting with, area agencies or provider agencies are greatly appreciated. This is where we will know that, if we're running into any problems and we have any questions, that's the best place for us to, get your answers. So thanks for your one-to-one meetings.
Thank
I'm
you,
glad they
Sudip.
were helpful, and we'll work with BDS. I'm not sure how that's going to look. The assistance with with the annual cost report and how that's going to look going forward, but we'll make sure that gets communicated out to you guys.
Thank you.
So with that, just to kind of summarize where we are right now, for our next July rate work group, and I think I've said as Matt earlier, I'm going to kill this, 90 times today, we'll be reviewing the cost report. So just full transparency, if you want other folks to come, make sure they come, and we'll do our best to get this session up for their review as well. August, we plan to begin to, we paused our rate development to begin to share some of the DD waiver rates and review those and kind of go over those drafts that we've since given Leslie and Krista the thumbs up to move forward with that. Again, at the beginning, we gave our roadmap plan for the completion of the cost report. We want to make sure that we get good data back. We give you time to do it. So we'll continue to discuss that, but our goal is to get it out. I think we said the beginning, is it September?
Sometime in September.
Sometime in September. So, again, we want to meet with our provider group. We're going to meet with our area agency business managers for their particular sections of the cost report, as well as continuing with the rate work group to assist in giving us feedback. So that is where we are for today. And at the beginning, over the next few months, BDS is going to be putting pencils down and working on the recommendations we got for the whole exceptions process to develop a plan for that. Are there any kind of questions, comments from our rate work group members on, what you've heard today? Okay. So that's it. And our next meeting is on July 19th. And again, if you have feedback for us in the interim, you have that email. So we appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.